time. We will start almost immediately at 7 o'clock, and the room will fill. Tonight, for those that are on YouTube, please note that there will probably be somewhere between 400 and 500 other folks joining us on YouTube, nationally and internationally, as well as the folks that will be on our Zoom call, the Fireside Zoom chat, which should probably populate tonight in the neighborhood of about 75 to 80 people. So we are very, very thankful to Warren and to Stephanie for lending their names and their professionalism to help us build this audience this evening for B'nai Brith Canada.
My pleasure.
Pleasure to be here.
We've got about 4 minutes now, 5 minutes to start time. So we can enjoy some conversation in the interim.
I could tell you some bad jokes, but I probably shouldn't.
Great. How have you been, Phil?
You're muted.
You're on mute, Phil. There you go.
I'm good, Aubrey. Thank you. All things are moving in the right direction. The cyber activity is, as you know, quite prolific. But other than that, it's all good.
Good. I'm glad we were able to get that issue resolved without any detail in your neighborhood recently.
Yeah, interestingly enough, there was a moving van there today.
I saw that.
So I was at the office all day today, so I didn't have a chance to see what they were moving out.
We won't go into any detail because of the nature of that
Yep.
situation, but I'm glad that it was tended to.
Yep, I agree.
And I thank you for making us aware of that so that we could clean up the neighborhood a little bit better.
Yep.
There we go.
It's I will just mention that the awareness came about as a result of having cameras on the street. So I'm going to put a bit of a shameless plug in for Street View, which is a camera project that was initiated by Aubrey and Deborah with York Regional Police. And the attempt is to get more and more homeowners to register their cameras at this particular website, so that in the event that something untoward is recognized by the public in York Region, York Regional Police would have the ability to at least approach those homeowners and see if they can get that camera information to help them in solving crime. And so as a result of that, Aubrey, my cameras were picking up some activity, and that sort of spurred that whole scenario. So again, a shameless plug for Street View in York Region, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you. It was so important when we realized that the one thing that is not affordable to our police with the budgetary restraints that they're facing is to the placement of cameras strategically all over the place. And when Deborah and I went out on a drive around with our officers, we realized how many cameras there are in the residential and commercial areas in York Region. And that's when we created that registry where people could register the fact that they had cameras with YRP. YRP does not have direct access to those cameras, but if there's an incident, when the officers are notified, a map appears in their vehicle. It shows exactly where the cameras are. They can tap on it, and when they tap on it, it will give them the name, the address, the email address, and a mobile number to be able to contact the owners And instead of having to waste the money to send 8, 10 officers to walk and knock and talk, they have the ability to go direct and to get the footage within minutes of an incident happening. So we are in the midst with Project Street View in the camera registry of growing that out. We've been talking with the OPP about doing something like this province-wide. Okay, it is now 7:01. So I am going to begin because although we've still got people registering or coming in on the Zoom call, we do have a live audience on the YouTube that is waiting for us. So please let me begin. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and special guests, and welcome to the B'nai Brith Canada monthly Fireside Zoom chat, which is also being presented live on our YouTube channel at this time to a national and international audience. I'm Dr. Aubrey Zeidenberg, a volunteer with B'nai Brith for over 30 years, Vice President of B'nai Brith International for Canada, and founder and national chair of the Special Advisory Council to the League for Human Rights since 2004, and police liaison. B'nai Brith is the oldest Jewish human rights organization in the world. We've been operating since 1843, and in Canada since 1875. These monthly events are part of a series done in conjunction with our League for Human Rights, which is comprised of over 35 committed liaisons from the diverse multicultural communities, the collective minorities that are reflective of the new face of Canada. This advisory council, now in its 20th year, brings together community leaders under the umbrella of B'nai Brith in an unbreakable friendship, as friends of the family we choose for ourselves. For the last 11 years, I've also been co-chair with the head of intelligence and organized crime of the York Regional Police Chiefs Community Advisory Council, ISCAC, our integrated strategic community advisory council, which deals with organized crime, terrorism, guns and gangs, drugs, vice, human trafficking, and hate crimes. Some of our impressive past Zoom guests that have given us updates and insight into issues that impact our lives have included Jason Kenney, journalist Diane Francis, Richard Heidemann, the world president of B'nai Brith, CIBC world president Victor Dodig, Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Federal Conservative Party, York Regional Police Chief Jim McSween, Toronto Police Chief Myron Demkew, the Commissioner of the Ontario Provincial Police Tom Carrique. We've had Stephen Lecce, Michael Kersner, our Solicitor General, the Israeli Consul General Adit Shamir, Phyllis Heidemann, the President of the March of the Living and former President of the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington. And most recently, we've had Majid El-Shafi, who is currently working in Israel on Dying to Live, a documentary on October 7. Our format this evening will be a 30-minute fireside chat with Warren Kinsella. It'll be hosted by Stephanie Smyth, followed by a 15-minute Q&A opportunity for our Zoom guests. You can either send your questions in or raise your hand, and Stephanie will acknowledge you. Let me take a moment, please, to introduce our special guests. But please remember, everyone, place yourselves on Zoom. Everyone that is on Zoom, place yourselves on mute, and you will be your line will be opened up if and when a question is asked of you. Warren Kinsella. Warren is the president of Daisy Consulting Group. Previously, he was a partner in the law firm of McMillan Binch in its public policy group, and has also worked as a consultant, journalist, and political chief of staff. Warren received a Bachelor of Journalism honors from Carleton University and his law degree from the University of Calgary. He has also completed executive education courses at Harvard's Law School and its School of Business. From 1990 to 1993, Warren held positions as assistant to the Right Honorable John Chrétien, leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, In addition, from 1993 to 1996, Warren served as Chief of Staff to a number of federal ministries. In 2003, 2007, and 2011, he was the chairman of the War Room in the successful Ontario Liberal Party election campaigns. Federally, he managed the Liberal Party Canada's War Room 1993 and 2000. Most recently, he helped oversee the 2018 winning campaign of Toronto Mayor John Tory, and in 2020, he worked in several states in the victorious Biden-Harris campaign. Warren is an award-winning author and journalist and has assisted clients on a wide range and variety of communications, strategic, and regulatory matters. Warren is a former member of the executive of the Ontario Bar Association. For several years, he has been an adjunct professor at the University of Calgary's Faculty of Law. He has published numerous books, including his bestseller, The War Room, Political Strategies for Business, NGOs, and Anyone Who Wants to Win. This evening, we're also very, very fortunate to have with us as our host, Stephanie Smyth. Most recently, Stephanie was the managing editor of CP24 in Toronto. She was also lead anchor for breaking news and anchored the daily flagship Live at 5 newscast, as well as special coverage. Stephanie helped build CP24 into a powerhouse and market leader. A skilled interviewer, Stephanie has spoken live with prime ministers, premiers, countless local politicians. Stephanie hosted municipal, provincial, and federal elections, as well as a leadership conventions and state funerals. In 1993, Stephanie joined 680 News, Canada's first all-news radio station. After 6 years, Stephanie became the news director. Under her leadership, 680 News became the first radio station in Canada to win the prestigious Edward R. Morrow Award for the best radio newscast in the world. Stephanie's TV career began in 2003 at Global Television in Toronto as its news director. Her credibility, authentic interview style, and deep editorial knowledge of local and world events has gained her access to key newsmakers from around the world. Stephanie now runs her own media relations and communications firm, Smyth Media Group, Inc. Ladies and gentlemen, we are proud to have as our special guest this evening, Warren Kinsella, and our special host, Stephanie Smyth.
Thank you.
And thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here this evening. And it's so interesting being on this new platform. You know, it's kind of still similar to television where you're talking basically to nobody in front of you, but a few faces. I wouldn't see that on television. I'd see a teleprompter, but you know, here I am back talking to an audience, which is a great thrill and a great honor. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight, and also a great opportunity to speak with Warren this evening about issues that are very, very of great concern to all of us this evening. And I thought, in the spirit of, you know, how I operate in news for my 30-year career in the business, I thought I might start the evening and the conversation with Warren about, you know, the news headlines. So I'm just going to read to you some of the headlines that I'm sure you have seen over the past few days. And these are headlines just this week, okay? And it's Thursday. Monday, March 18th, headline on CBC, Toronto Police Chief. So far, 56% of reported hate crimes in 2024 have targeted Jewish people. Monday, March 18th, headline, Globe and Mail, House passes motion after NDP removes call for recognition of the Palestinian state. Monday, March 18th, headline, Toronto Sun, Vaughan Mayor wants crackdown on hate-based protests near vulnerable infrastructure. Tuesday, March 19th, headline, Toronto Star, Trudeau government will stop sending arms to Israel, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says. Tuesday, March 19th, headline, Times of Israel, Canada's parliament urges two-state solution, but not recognition of Palestinian state. Wednesday, March 19th, headline, Hamilton Spectator. Hamilton Movie Theatre cancels Jewish Film Festival April screenings over safety concerns. Thursday, March 20th, today, headline in the Globe and Mail, La Presse removes cartoon denounced as anti-Semitic. So yes, all these headlines this week alone, and it's only Thursday. So clearly the situation in Israel and Gaza continues to have a ripple effect or collateral damage, or however you want to call it, here in Toronto and Canada in many, many forms. Now, here's where Mr. Kinsella comes in. Warren has been writing about the Israel-Hamas war for months now, but in fact, he has been writing about anti-Semitism for over 30 years. And Warren, we heard the stats from Toronto police regarding hate towards the Jewish community. And, we see the demonstrations and the editorial cartoons. So, my first question to you is, have we ever seen it this bad?
Well, thank you for having me, all of you, and thank you, excuse me, for tuning in. And Stephanie and Aubrey, thank you for the kind words. Have we ever seen it this bad? Have I ever seen it this bad? No. I have been writing about intolerance and bigotry and anti-Semitism for over 3 decades. And my experience is, and I'm sure all of you would agree, that it fluctuates. It moves around, and external events like 9/11 or what have you affect it. But I don't think I've ever seen it as bad as it is at the moment. And it surprised me, the magnitude of it and the extent of it and how global it is. And one of the things that I've been preoccupied with as a lawyer and as a citizen and as somebody who writes for Post Media is, and maybe get back to what Aubrey mentioned about my CV. I've been involved in politics for a long, long time. And one of the things you learn in politics, maybe one of the few things you learn in politics, is how to spot organization and money. Prior to October 7th, I think any of you who are in the Toronto area would know who I'm talking about in this example. You'd have losers like Paul Frum or John Ross Taylor or Don Andrews. And these were anti-Semites and bigots. They'd run for city council, they'd run to be a school trustee, and they'd become 7th in the field of 7 candidates. They would attract derision, they wouldn't attract support. They'd sometimes have meetings and they'd get 20 or 30 people showing up. They were never organized, they were never successful. Something has happened. And this is, as I say, my political antenna started to move after October 7th, because there's no way, folks, and I think most of you would agree with me, there is no way that you can put together a global, professional-looking, organized, well-financed campaign in a single night. If you look at the data, for example, online, and this campaign is rolling out not just online, it's taking place in the streets, it's taking place in academia, in union boardrooms, you name it, NGOs, it's everywhere. There's no way you can pull off a campaign like that, politically or otherwise, overnight. If you look at the data for when the spikes happened in the surge in anti-Semitism, it happened on the morning of October the 8th. It happened again on October the 10th. It happened again on October the 11th. What that says to me, somebody with political experience, is this has been an organized effort that involves money and a great deal of preparation. And so, quite apart from the atrocities committed by Hamas against, Israeli men, women, children, and babies on the 7th and thereafter, quite apart from that, this campaign, this global propaganda campaign, I've never seen anything like it in my lifetime. It is comprehensive, it is ubiquitous, and unfortunately at the moment, it's quite effective. But I think there are things that we can and should be doing to fight it.
There's a saying in journalism, you would know, that it's like, follow the money. So it's, effective, it's targeted, it's, happened instantaneously overnight, as you said. So in your estimation, where is the money coming from? What is how is the funding getting there?
Well, one of the stories that I wrote, I guess I broke, was, sometimes people get sloppy, and Stephanie would know this from her many years as a journalist. Sometimes they slip. Sometimes you see what the truth is. And a few weeks ago, I became aware of the fact that this little group out in Victoria, British Columbia, called the Plenty Collective, had slipped. And, they were one of these typical far left groups and preoccupied with the usual issues and so on. But they made a mistake. They opened up their web presence so that I could see it. And what it showed was that they were spending as much as $20,000 a month paying people to show up and protest against Israel. Then I discovered that allied groups, a theater company, for example, in Victoria, were doing the same thing. Then I spoke to people in Montreal. It's happening there. It's happening in New York City. It's happening around the planet. Now, I'm not suggesting to you that some of the people we're seeing in the streets and some of the things that we're seeing online are not just happening spontaneously. There is some of that. But what I am suggesting to you is that this is an organized effort with lots of money behind it. Where is the money coming from? That's something that I'm going to be working on with some of my colleagues over the coming months. But what I've already seen in respect of just one group in Canada is a strong connection via this Bitcoin world that, some of us would need to understand better than we do, a direct connection to Iran. So Iran, like China in the Canadian elections of 2019 and 2021, like Russia in the US presidential campaign of 2016, it is in their interest, it's in their strategic interest to disrupt democracies like ours. And their target initially is the Jewish community. And they are doing this with groups small and large in Canada, across the United States, and in Western Europe. And, as Stephanie says, it's really important that we follow the money. And that's one of the things that I'm going to be doing in coming months.
And Warren, I wrote a lot of headlines there, but this was one of your headlines, the story that you say you broke, the protesters paid to take part in the pro-Palestinian demonstrations. But there's two other headlines I want to read to everybody. This is in the Toronto Sun. Kinsella, global campaign promoting anti-Semitism deployed one day after October 7th. You spoke briefly about that, but maybe we can unpack that a bit more. And then your other headline, Toronto Sun, Kinsella, anti-Semitism among our younger generation is a greater threat than Hamas. Disturbing headlines and grabbing attention for sure. So you've talked about following the money and the mobilization, but how quickly it happened after October 7th. How was that possible that it could be so quickly, just explain to us, so quickly organized and then so quickly deployed? And
well, maybe, sorry, go ahead.
Nope, over to you.
Well, let me ask everybody a skill testing question. I think most of us, certainly people of my generation, when you're looking for an answer to something online, when you're looking for information, when you're looking for a news story, I think most of us turn to Google. But Generation Z, which is people between the ages of 18 and about 24, and millennials who are between about the age of 25 and 41, but particularly Generation Z, they don't use Google as their source of information about the outside world. They use TikTok. And why is that important? Well, TikTok is one of the principal platforms for anti-Semitism on the planet. It's headquartered in the People's Republic of China. It is ultimately controlled by the People's Republic of China. And, as we've seen, and it actually is the subject of a parliamentary inquiry, judicial inquiry at the moment, like China has interfered in our democracy in 2019 and 2021. So unfortunately, with younger generations, we have a big problem. I don't want to cite the statistics specifically because they're quite upsetting. But I have seen statistics, particularly with respect to this Generation Z group, who not only are they indifferent to the atrocities of Hamas on October 7th, about a third of them support it. Not only are they indifferent to attacks on Jews in this country, whether physically or spiritually, in their homes, in their businesses, in their communities, not only are they indifferent to that, some of them favor it. So we have a big, big problem with younger generations. And these two questions are related that Stephanie has asked me. And I think a principal reason for that is what they are receiving and what they are seeing online. Like, you know, I was speaking to one expert in Israel a few days ago, and, you know, I'm not going to bore you with talk about algorithms and so on, but I said, you know, a lot of these young people are educated. You know, we're seeing it at Concordia and McMaster and York and so on, and even in places like the University of Alberta, where I'm from, you know, they're being manipulated and they're being radicalized in Canada and, you know, in regular communities in suburbia. How is that possible? And what this expert related to me, we talked about 9/11. So in the case of 9/11, you had these Saudi nationals, some of whom had been in the United States for quite some time. And they weren't considered radical at the point when they entered the United States. All that it took was about 30 minutes of exposure. And just keep in mind, at that point, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, none of them existed. All that really existed was YouTube. All it took was about 30 minutes of direct exposure to Islamist propaganda on YouTube to start shifting the opinions of these young men who carried out the horrors of 9/11. So just imagine if that is representative of what's happening now. We've got young people receiving professionally rendered propaganda. It's like a sewer pipe that does not stop. And this is what young people are saying. And it's effective. It's working. All of us have seen the videos online where you have young people being asked, you know, which river and which sea are being referred to, and they don't know the answer. And it's kind of funny. But the scary thing is that is not funny is it just shows you the degree to which they can and are being manipulated. So it's really important. I think all of us, one of the things I'd recommend to everybody listening to me now, every one of you has got the means to affect opinion. You know, I started my website, warrenkinsella.com. You can find a lot of my writing there. I started it about 20 years ago. And the reason why I started it is because a friend got in touch with me and he said, you know, Ernst Zundel and David Irving, the two notorious Holocaust deniers, attack you all the time on the internet. And I said, yeah, well, what am I supposed to do about it? And this friend said, start a website. So I did. And now I've got, you know, in some years, as many as 6 million visitors. That's one of the things I'd encourage everybody to do is we have to collectively push back against this stuff so that our young people, but also everybody, is seeing the truth and not just trust the media to do it. You know, I know a lot of people are mad at people like Stephanie I in the media these days, and I understand that. But the biggest problem the media's got is there's so few of us, and more of us are being laid off all the time. That opens up a vast opportunity for Iran and Qatar and the extremists to propagate their hateful messages. So it's critically important that all of us, and I mean every single one of you on this call, assists in pushing back and telling the truth, because our side represents the truth. Their side represents not just hate, but it's lies, it's dishonesty. It's critical that we tell the truth as we know it. And I think ultimately, if we keep at it, we will prevail.
You know, you talked about TikTok, such a huge influence on the other younger generations. And, you know, is this a platform, whether it be, you know, controlled by China or not, where, you know, you can meet on level ground, right? So there can be the, you know, fight back against the hate, against all of that on that platform, you know, to give the counter. Like, is there enough going on to spread the message? To counteract what we're hearing on and seeing on TikTok?
There is not. Like, guys, I would like to tell all of you that we're winning the battle. We are not. And pardon my language, we are getting our asses kicked online. And on TikTok, You know, the TikTok is different than the other platforms. TikTok is the greatest data mining site. It's the greatest device for obtaining information about you in the history of the planet. So I think the U.S. House of Representatives, Democrats and Republicans last week did the right thing. They voted to tell TikTok that if it doesn't change its ownership structure and get rid of the Chinese Communist Party as a controlling mind, then TikTok would be banned in the United States. Canada needs to do the same thing. As to whether the Trudeau government will do that, I find doubtful, but hopefully Pierre Poilievre, that's something else people can do. Petition Poilievre to deal with TikTok. It is a big problem. The biggest source of hate online is Twitter, or as it's now known, X. The problem is, to put it in the briefest terms, Elon Musk. Now, I know Musk did his cleanup on aisle 3 tour recently to Israel, but the bottom line is he is a free speech absolutist. He believes in letting people say whatever the hell they want, and he has done that. So the haters who had been previously banished, the white supremacists, the Hitler freaks, the neo-Nazis, and the anti-Semites, who had been previously banned from Twitter, are all now back. And in some cases, they're getting paid to promote their hateful messages. Now, there are groups who know what they're doing, including one group in Israel called Cyberwell, who does excellent work. What Cyberwell does is they document the hateful statements and whatnot that is found on X. They bring it to Musk and say, you need to clean this up. He is getting better at doing that. He's actually also indicated just a few days ago, he is now going to hire 150 people in his headquarters in Texas to start moderating, because you can't do moderation through automation. And so, you know, things may get better there. Facebook, Facebook's algorithm is designed away from news, but obviously there's still a problem there. So all of them are unique. They all have unique problems. And I would suspect all of you in some way are on one or, a few or even all of them. It is critically important that you use the reporting mechanisms that exist within those platforms. If you see something, just don't get depressed, don't get angry, report it, report it, report it. Don't engage with the haters. My advice always to people is block early, block often. Most of the time, they're just in a boiler room in St. Petersburg or somewhere in Qatar, and they're not real people. Block them, report them as often as you can. That's something that all of us can do as individuals.
So you've worked in messaging, right? You've worked on campaigns, you've worked as a journalist. So you know all the tactics and the strategies, right, to get messaging out. So how do you turn it around? Would B'nai Brith come up with its own new social media policy, right? That's aggressive? Or is it, something on Facebook, something on Twitter, or, somehow making use of conventional media again, even though I understand how there's concern and distrust now. I mean, we understand with the cutbacks, conventional media is the oversight. That's why you're seeing the editorial cartoons get published. Oops, again, here has happened again. It's about oversight. It's about understanding also about the whole situation. Like, the newsrooms have changed so dramatically. You want to talk about who's running newsrooms now? Well, they're not my age anymore, right? And younger generations, I'm not saying that they're not educated or they're not able to understand the conflict, but I think there's not enough oversight to ensure that the stories are being told in factual and a balanced manner. So tactic strategies now, expert communicator Warren Kinsella, what's your biggest hopeful strategy here?
Well, that's a big question, and it's got lots of moving parts in it. So let me deal with 4. Number one, with respect to education, we've seen some of the most prestigious universities in the world, one of which educated me at Harvard, but at MIT and so on, just appalling attitudes being exhibited by the leadership there. Same things happening here, particularly at McGill, Concordia, McMaster, York, and at UBC. We've got big problems. We need to change the leadership at those institutions. Those institutions in Canada, unlike in the United States, receive public funding. And we are entitled as taxpayers to insist that our representatives are ensuring that these universities, these post-secondary education institutions, are protecting Jewish kids and making sure that there's a balance in the curriculum. That's number one. That's education. Number two, in the media, Stephanie and I would love to tell you guys that we are going to come up with the magic formula to save the media, but we're not, right? I can easily see a situation where less than 5 years from now, there's probably half a dozen daily newspapers left in all of North America, right? There's going to be a dramatically smaller number of TV and radio stations. And that's horrible. That's horrible for democracy. But that means, as I said a few minutes ago, it's incumbent on all of us to tell the truth. We all have the means. You know, I've told you the story of my little website. I just did it because I was being attacked by these 2 Holocaust deniers. And with a lot of work and a lot of commitment, I was getting 6 million visitors a year. So I get more people looking at my website than a lot of daily newspapers do. So that's what can happen in respect to the media. Online, we've talked about social media. Why is social media so important? Well, for the younger generation who are in danger of losing, that is as I indicated, their principal source of information. It's how they communicate with each other, and it's how they relate to the outside world. Political parties are responding to that. Most of their budgets are now spent on social media and things like Facebook. They don't really spend so much on traditional media anymore. So if that's where the bad guys are, we need to be there too. But the one thing I haven't talked about yet, and this is, forgive me for putting on my lawyer's hat, I am a lawyer. I have taught innocent children how to be a lawyer, and I am a lawyer. We have in this country, and this is a positive thing, we have an abundance of laws to deal with the problems that all of us are seeing online and in the streets. In my opinion, we do not need new laws. We've got laws to criminalize the willful promotion of hatred against identifiable groups. We've got laws against the promotion of genocide. We've got laws, all sorts of laws to deal with all of the things that we've been seeing. What we lack, what we do not have, is the leadership and the courage, quite frankly, with the police, with the prosecutors and the politicians to apply the laws that we've got. That is what we need to do. Stephen Del Duca, who Stephanie mentioned off the top, he has done what, ironically, amazingly, has been done in the province of Quebec. In Quebec, we've seen synagogues firebombed. We've seen little kids' schools, Jewish kids' schools, being shot up not once, but twice. We've seen Jewish community centers firebombed all over the island of Montreal. So what did the Jewish community, and to give it some credit, the provincial government do? They applied to the Quebec Superior Court to create bubble zones, really, around places of worship. So much in the way that is done with abortion clinics in Canada and the United States, there's a zone of protection around those places. So that is what Del Duca has done in Ontario, and we all should applaud him for it. But we need to be pressuring Olivia Chow to be doing the same thing. We need to be making sure that that is happening in every single jurisdiction in this country, because now there is now a precedent to do so. If we have that happening, it becomes a hell of a lot more difficult for the bad guys to do what they're doing, and it becomes much more difficult for the police to give an excuse. And I know some of you are involved in advising police forces in Ontario and elsewhere. I think the police forces of this country, many of them, have dropped the ball. I think that they have done an appalling job. They have not used the powers that we citizens have given to them to apply the criminal law. So this is one way to do it, is to create zones of safety around synagogues and places of worship and places of significance for the Jewish community to protect Canadian Jews, because we need to have that now. We obviously have got a big problem. It's not getting better, and this is one way of dealing with it.
You mentioned Stephen Del Duca in Vaughan. What is your take on GTA mayors anyway? Or, this is going across the country. So any mayors you think who have been most effective when it comes to fighting anti-Semitism?
Well, in Ottawa is one place where, to give them credit, They've got a new mayor there. They've got a new police chief. And I think they learned from the occupation of Ottawa, you know, that 3-week period where you had the convoy people there, whether you like them or not. I think the Ottawa police force learned that if, as Aubrey was saying before the session started, if you give these people an inch, they're going to take a yard. You have to be tough. You have to apply the law. They've done that in Ottawa, and it's already yielded results. They arrested 2 young offenders who were involved in an actual terrorist plot to kill multiple Jews. So in Ottawa, it's working. Why isn't it working in places like Montreal and Toronto? Montreal and Toronto have the 2 biggest problems. I note that in Ottawa, in Toronto and Montreal, we have 2 mayors who I think would characterize themselves as progressive on the left. People who are progressives, I think, too often regard police as the enemy. So what's happened in Montreal, and I've talked to people there, and I've certainly talked to a lot of people in Toronto, the mayors in those cities, you know, they can't be giving direction to the police. No politician should be telling the police or prosecutors what to do. That's how Justin Trudeau got in trouble with Jody Wilson-Raybould and the SNC Lavalin scandal, right? Politicians should not be telling police and prosecutors what to do. However, they can create policies that the police apply. They can be ensuring that the police have the budgets to apply the criminal law. And most of all, they can be indicating to the police, look, if you act against these thugs, if you have an imam who stands up in front of 20,000 people in Montreal before the holidays and calls on God to exterminate the Jews, that is obviously a criminal offense. If you act against that imam, we will have your back. Go to it. But instead, in Montreal, that imam has been walking the streets, a free man, for many weeks. You know, and in Toronto, the firebombing of the deli, the IDF deli in North York, the bad guys are still walking the streets. We need the politicians to say to the police, we've got your backs. If you got to crack down, if you got to get tougher, we will support you. I think you're muted.
Sorry, Chief Demkew just did a fireside chat, this fireside chat a month ago, and was talking about the concerns about the hate crimes and how they have all kinds of tentacles everywhere and they're connected to the RCMP and for the investigations, right? There's all kinds of investigations behind the scenes going on. They're watching the hate, they're watching the people behind it. So there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than we are seeing. They're watching closely and they're acting when they see it necessary to act. I watched the response on this chat and it seemed everybody was content with the answers from Chief Demkew. I'm not sure that maybe everybody was just being nice, but I mean, to that end, Warren, here you can speak your thoughts on how Chief Demkew has reacted. We saw him coming out talking about the hate crimes up 56% so far this year, anti-Semitic hate. Do you think there's just, is he not acting strongly enough right now? They did finally move on Avenue Road, finally, the bridge.
Yeah, I don't want to malign somebody who's previously been a guest to this group. And I'm not the kind of person who criticizes somebody behind their back, but he's not here. He's probably busy doing other things. But I think it's time for a change in leadership. And that moment for me came before the holidays again, when they're not pro-Palestinian, they're anti-Israel, they're anti-Semitic, they are pro-Hamas, flooded the Eaton Center at the Christmas period, threatening Santa, threatening parents who are there with their kids. And one of these thugs wearing a mask, which in itself is a criminal offense. If you wear a mask committing a criminal offense, it's a criminal offense in itself. And said right in front of a group of police, I'm going to put you 6 feet under. He made a death threat in front of the police. What happened, Chief Demkew? Zero. Nothing. Now, ultimately, I think because that story went international, it went around the world, not just in Israel. People saw that, and I think the Toronto Police Service was embarrassed. But it is completely unacceptable that that is happening, or a horde of people are marching down University, stopping in front of Mount Sinai Hospital, where children are receiving treatment for cancer, and are chanting Intifada and From the River to the Sea. From the river to the sea, it's oblique, it's vague, but it is a call to genocide. It means wiping out all of Israel. That is genocide. That's the dictionary definition of genocide. That is something, too, the Chief Demq can be acting upon. He has not. So I think some police chiefs, some police forces in this country have done well comparatively. In Toronto and Montreal, they have not.
Well, Warren, I'm just observing the time here. It's 7:40, and I feel like I could talk to you forever. And I know probably everybody else is feeling the same way, but I want to ask you another question, and then we can start to maybe weave in some questions.
And I'll shorten my answers. I apologize.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think they're fabulous. But what I wanted to ask you was about, you were talking about hate online. You have been writing endlessly about this topic. You said yourself for 30 years, and then just since October 8th, hate, you've likely felt your share of it. Can you explain to us the wrath that you have felt for covering this as diligently as you have?
Yeah, no, I've got my fair share of it. And, sometimes I act on it. And that's, again, something I encourage all of you to do. A few years ago here, I'm in the beach right now in East Toronto. And those of you outside of Toronto may find this hard to believe. But for years in this neighborhood, there was a newspaper published called Your Ward News. It was a pro-Nazi, pro-Hitler newspaper that regularly defamed Jews. And in one issue, they indicated that they wanted to see me bludgeoned to death, quote unquote. And I said, to hell with this. I went to the police. They weren't prepared to do anything. I said, okay, fine. I appeared before a justice of the peace, like Sabina Citrin did so many years ago with Ernst Zundel, and initiated a private prosecution. So basically, I embarrassed the authorities into taking action and prosecute those hate mongers. Unfortunately, we had, in my opinion, a crummy judge, and we were not successful there, but we were ultimately successful in getting the publisher and the editor of that garbage thrown in jail for a year for promoting hatred against Jews and against women. And that was actually a first in Canadian history. There'd never been successful prosecution for promoting hatred against women. So, my advice is not to give up. When you get the threats, I know it is upsetting. I know it can be very challenging for a family. And my advice is do not take it lying down. You have to push back. And if you want to talk to somebody like me, I encourage you to do so. And I'll give you advice about where to go and who to reach out to, but you can't let it go. I think that's a message that B'nai Brith in particular has been communicating to the Canadian Jewish community for decades. Don't let it go. Report it. Let them know about it. Have them help. There's a lot of us here who want to help, and it's critically important that we do not let these things happen in silence.
We spent, you spent so much time working with former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, and we know how Justin Trudeau has handled this crisis. How do you imagine that Jean Chrétien would have dealt with today's events if he were Prime Minister today?
Well, I don't have to imagine. I've talked to him. And, I talk to him on a regular basis. He was my boss. Now he's my friend. He would not have put up with this crap. He would not have. And, he is a believer in the law as well. It is important that we do not permit lawlessness to grow. It is important that we do not permit hate to grow. And so, the Trudeau liberals, and I always call them that, I don't think they're liberals. I think they're Trudeau liberals. I think they're much closer to the NDP with all that means. And I think they've done a terrible job. And, I think the polls show that most Canadians feel that way. That's one thing that I want to emphasize to everybody, as I know how upsetting and depressing the past few weeks and months have been. Jews were the victims of October 7th. And instead of the world, embracing Israel and Jews and protecting them, the reverse happened. And it was an extraordinary and terrible event. But, the polling, and my firm, the Daisy Group, we do polling. We write questionnaires. I can tell you the vast majority of Canadians and Americans and people in Europe are on the side of Israel and are on the side of the Jewish community. Truly. So you may say, well, how are they having these rallies in the streets? They're having these rallies in the streets with so many people because, as I said, some of them are being paid to be there. The organizers are definitely being paid to be there. And they're trying to give the impression of momentum. But most particularly, the reason why they're having these big rallies every single Sunday is to intimidate people into silence, to scare people, to say, oh, I'm alone. You are not alone. The majority are with us. The majority are on the side of the Jewish community. The majority are on the side of Israel to exist within safe and secure borders and to wipe out the monsters in Hamas and to bring back the hostages. The majority is there. So don't believe for a moment what you see in the streets is representative of what Canadians feel. It is not.
And, also we can't help but think about Prime Minister Mulroney this week as well, as he lies in repose in Montreal or Ottawa ahead of his state funeral on Saturday. So would his approach have been the same as Mr. Chrétien?
Yeah, for sure. And, an example of that is South Africa. South Africa is an apartheid state. South Africa is an enemy of Israel, in my opinion, a lot of the civilized world at the moment. But when apartheid was being practiced there, which is institutionalized racism, Ronald Reagan said, let it go. Margaret Thatcher said, let it go. They were the two biggest international allies of Brian Mulroney. And Brian Mulroney, to his enormous and everlasting tribute, to his credit, he said, no, Canada will not stand for apartheid. And he led the charge against sanctions, looked for sanctions against South Africa. And it changed the future of South Africa. And, Nelson Mandela came to Canada to thank Mulroney and thank Canadians for doing that. So there's an example of what we can, even in a little country like Canada, that we can and should be doing. But I think at the moment, it's going to require a change of government. I think the Trudeau guys are just too far gone.
Back in 2007, Warren, you wrote Jews shouldn't abandon the left. Here we are, 2024, right? What do you say now for hope?
Well, I don't. Well, as you mentioned at the top, I've been writing about this stuff for a long time. The anti-Semitism, and I think many of you would agree with me, right now, for sure, it is predominantly a problem on the left. But 20 and 30 years ago, it was predominantly a problem on the right. The thing that I've learned about anti-Semitism over the years is it's a shapeshifter. It moves around. It doesn't belong to an ideology. It is an ideology unto itself. And so whatever it takes, it used to be at the time of the Holocaust, of course, the Holocaust was devised by Christian nations and carried out by Christian nations. Now, I think probably the biggest supporters of Israel are Christians and people like me who believe in Israel and love Israel and the Jewish people and their right to exist in harmony. But it moves around. And this is the devilish quality of anti-Semitism is it moves, it changes and it adapts to circumstances. And you've seen that since October 7th. What was the first thing they did? The first thing they did said no babies were killed. I've seen the footage, babies were killed. They said there were no atrocities. There were certainly atrocities. They said there was no sexual violence against women. So whatever it is that Israel wishes to say terrible things happened to us, like the Holocaust deniers, Zundel and Irving and so on, they deny that because it's critically important to them that Israel not be seen as a victim. And Israel has been a victim. So it's important, again, that all of us tell the truth and push back against this international organized lie that has been set loose since October the 7th.
Well, I'm wondering what we should do about questions now. If there are any out there, I've been getting some comments in the comments section. I'm not sure how we usually handle the questions. Maybe Aubrey, you can give me a hand here, or somebody if we have any coming in any way, shape, or form. Because
Aubrey, if I may, I'd like to start the questioning. I'm Marty York. I'm the communications director at B'nai.
Hey, Marty.
Hi, guys. I have to tell you, the conversation, Warren and Stephanie, was riveting. The dialogue was great. The questions were terrific, Stephanie, and the answers were outstanding, Warren. And you both have a great understanding of what is going on and why we're so troubled. Our community is extremely troubled at this time, obviously. I have a question that I'd like to ask Warren about, because unless I missed it, you didn't touch on this. UNRWA is a really it's a delicate question with us. We have been pushing and advocating for decades at B'nai Brith to stop, to try to get the government to ensure that we stop paying our taxpayer money towards UNRWA, because UNRWA indoctrinates children in schools. And Warren, I'll ask you to expand on it, but I asked Andrew Scheer when he came to visit B'nai Brith a couple of years ago, and he said the first thing he would do would stop our money going to UNRWA. I wonder what Chrétien might say. That was like your question, Stephanie. And I wonder what you think about UNRWA in general.
Well, they're involved in murder. Like, it's been documented. UNRWA itself, its director general, admitted weeks ago that employees of UNRWA were involved in the atrocities of October 7th. Now, what the Canadian government indicated at that point, when it paused, didn't stop, it only paused its funding of UNRWA. And by the way, it was the Harper government that did stop it when they were in power.
Yes.
And, they allowed the funding to go ahead, but they said they were going to wait for the final report. They did not do so. So again, forgive me for being a lawyer, but I think this is an excellent opportunity for B'nai Brith or Wiesenthal or CIJA, or maybe all of the above, to bring an action against the government of Canada to say that you are acting illegally. You are providing funding to an organization that itself has admitted was involved in murder and rape and atrocities and torture and kidnappings. This organization admitted it itself, and you're funding that. I think that this is ripe for a legal action to bring against the government of Canada, a class action, maybe seek an injunction to stop it immediately. That's something that we can and should do, because Canada, I think there's just one other country in the world that's indicated that it's going to refund UNRWA. But everybody else, the Americans have said, we're not going to do it for another year. We want to find out what the answers are. So that's one thing that I think could compel and certainly embarrass the Trudeau government into revisiting their stance.
It's just mind-boggling to us that our money goes towards this, as you said, murderous group. Again, thank you very much to both of you. Stephanie, outstanding, and Warren, brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty.
Thank you, Marty.
Stephanie, if I could jump in for a quick second.
Please, yes.
Between you and Warren, if we needed to extend this a couple of extra moments because of the number of questions that might be out there, do either of you have a problem in doing that this evening?
No, for sure.
Not at all. Not at all.
I thank you very much. Thank you.
So I'm just trying to oh, we have a question. Okay, I'm unmuting you. There you go. Oop.
Can't hear you.
Now you can hear me. Hi.
There we go.
Hi.
I'm Vivian Ziner, and I am very involved in a lot of actions and events in terms of trying to fight this terrible situation. First of all, I want to thank you very, very much, both of you. I have a controversial question to ask. We have imported a lot of people who do not share our values here, and it's obvious. And we know that the people that are being brought in now from Gaza, you can only be brought in from Gaza if Hamas chooses you to be brought in. My question is there any way legally that we can remove these people from Canada? A lot of them, first of all, I'm not sure how they actually got in here, but we have now become the hotspot in the world for terrorism. This is where the money comes. This is where they have concentrated a huge number of very dangerous people who are committed to destroying our way of life, not just in terms of Jews. We all know we're the canaries. But is there any way, like if Pierre comes in, that we can ship these people out?
And Vivian, thanks for your question. And Vivian is telling the truth. Canada has, depending on how you measure it, one of the worst, or if not the worst, anti-Semitic crime problems in the world. That is the truth. Now, do we have the ability to remove these people? Yes, we do. You know, and I'm the great grandson of immigrants. I think all of us believe in immigration and bringing people to Canada and making a better country. But there are rules, you know, that you have to abide by. And in Canadian law, and this has been the case for decades, this is not a new thing. If you come here and you're not a citizen and you violate the law, and I'm not talking about indictable crimes, I'm talking about just what would be considered misdemeanors, you can be sent back to where you come from. That is the law right now. But again, Vivian, it gets back to that point I was making earlier. We've got the laws to deal with precisely that problem, but the law is not being applied. And I think, you know, whether it's Poilievre or Trudeau, we don't have time to waste. We need to deal with that now. Mark Miller indicated today he's the Minister of Immigration. Federally, immigration is a federal responsibility. I think he's finally acknowledging that there's a problem, and he's going to start dialing back, I think, by 3% what some of our immigration has been, some of the foreign workers, but that's not enough. You know, one of the examples I often give, Vivian, at the University College of Cape Breton, okay, in this beautiful distant part of the country, guess how many students are foreign students? 80%.
Yeah.
80%. That is ridiculous. By the year 2025, if the Trudeau government allows this trend to continue, 1.25 million foreign students are going to be in this country. Quite apart from the fact that some of them are not here to be students, they're here to cause trouble, we don't have housing for them. It's not fair to them, and it's not fair to the country to admit them in these circumstances. So, you know, we need to dial that back, and it's not racist to say that. It's just prudent. It's fair to them, and it's fair to us. When you have in the city of Toronto people coming here as refugees, we're telling people with little kids to sleep on the sidewalk in downtown Toronto in December. No way. That's not what this country is about.
Just further to that, when you were speaking before in terms of the bubbles, but how do you deal with, for example, this weekend, our dear friends are going to be marching from Yonge and St. Clair over to Forest Hill Village, as I've been informed. But so how do you stop that? I mean, how do we actually get somebody to, when you have a conversation with politicians, the MPs will tell you that it's the MPPs will tell you it's the police, and it goes around.
Yeah, too much time doesn't work. We've tried it. So I recommend, there's no better advice than the advice I followed myself. When I couldn't get the authorities, when I couldn't get the Crown and the police pay attention to Your Ward News and this Nazi rag being published and delivered to the homes of hundreds of thousands of people all over the city of Toronto, I initiated a private prosecution. So if you know that they're following a certain route, they're doing that to intimidate and terrify people in the Jewish community, have the people along the route appear in court and seek an injunction against that taking place. It will compel the police, if you win, if you obtain the injunction, it will compel the police to act. And you should be doing that in concert, as I say, with B'nai Brith and Wiesenthal and CJ and so on. They've got the lawyers and the resources to do it. We've got to do that. We can't just wait for the authorities to come to our rescue, because in too many places in this country, they're not doing it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And how can we contact you?
WarrenKinsella.com.
Okay, thank you.
Easy peasy.
Okay, we have a question from B'nai Brith Canada, Montreal. Over to you.
Good evening. My name is Hank Topaz. I'm the Quebec Regional Director.
Hi, Hank.
Quebec, of B'nai Brith in Quebec. And to your point about many students coming in, I think Quebec has beat the problem by making it almost impossible for foreign student to come into this province. But what you just touched upon in your previous answer with regard to compelling the police. We sit day after day here in Montreal with many, many demonstrations of incitement, intimidation, and the like. There are laws on the book, but I don't believe there is anything which is compelling the police to act, because I believe the politicians couldn't give a damn. Do you have any wisdom that we might share with our politicians or the courts to get the police to act? Because I know they'd like to.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you legal advice and political advice, and the legal advice is unofficial. So as I said, in Canada, even though you're governed by the civil code, you have the ability as citizens to appear before the court and seek a remedy, whether it's an injunction or what have you, or compel them to apply the laws that are there. So again, that's one of the things that needs to be done, whether you're in Quebec or anywhere else. But one thing that Quebec has done very successfully, like even after that imam stood up and called for God to exterminate the Jews, even Legault said, you know what, this is outrageous, that this guy's walking the streets. The police need to arrest this guy. Now, do I believe that Legault has had a conversion on the road to Damascus and has suddenly become sympathetic to the Jewish community? Not on your life. However, this is my political advice. What's happening in the province of Quebec this year?
The
It's an election. You're having an election. You're having an election. Like Brian Mulroney, who Stephanie referred to earlier, there's nothing that focuses the mind of a politician more than a good hanging in the morning. You have an election taking place in the province of Quebec this year. Play them off against each other. Get in their faces, right? Get up in their grill, as they say in hockey. Show up at the all candidates meetings. Ask them questions. Say, what are you prepared to do? We need your protection. Play the parties off against each other, all of them. Because I think even the Parti Québécois, not just the Liberals, but even the Parti Québécois knows that they need to be seen on the side of civil discourse and a lawful society. So that's something that you can do in Quebec that really we can't do in other parts of the country right now, is take advantage of the election that is taking place and make the politicians pay attention to what you're saying.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that question. I don't know if we've got more coming in right now, but hang on a second. I was going to ask you, Warren, about the whole message of taking matters into your own hands. You talked about the injunction, which I found fascinating because, you always feel so helpless. So there's actually a way, like, for instance, there could have been an injunction on the Avenue Road Bridge if somebody personally could have filed for an injunction. What does that look like in terms of timeline or difficulty, or do you need a lawyer to do it, a paralegal? How does that work?
No, well, in my case, now I am a lawyer.
Right.
So when I initiated the private prosecution against Your Word News, I was relying on my legal skills, but I also had the help of some prominent and well-known lawyers in this country who helped me out pro bono, including good people at Brith. So they helped me along the way. There's lots of people who believe what we do. So reach out for help and you can do that. But, to give you another example, it's not just the criminal law that we can apply. A few weeks ago, I make this story very short. My partner and I were having a New Year's levee. I live most of the time in Prince Edward County, and I live in a little hamlet of about 65 people. And I went around and I invited all of our neighbors over to come to our levee. And I went to the door of a new neighbor who's right across the street. And I knocked on her door, and she came out and had a stony look on her face. And I extended my hand, and she didn't take it. And I thought, well, maybe she's Orthodox or whatever. But I said, hi, I'm Warren, and my partner and I would like to invite you and your partner to our New Year's levee. And she said, no, she wouldn't take my hand. And she said, you should take down that flag. The flag she was referring to, I have been flying in front of my house at that point, the Ukrainian flag and the flag of Israel, to show solidarity with these two countries that are under attack. I said, why? I was shocked that she said this. And she said, because Israel's committing genocide against the Palestinian people. I said, no, it's not. She told me to get off her property. Anyway, so we forgot about her. We had a great party that night. The whole town showed up. We had a good time. One of the things that I've acquired in politics is a little bit of a spider sense. So I said to my partner, what's her name across the street again? She told me her name. I went online, and there on Instagram and Facebook, she's posted a message saying, we're not going to go to the party of our neighbors because they promote genocide. Warren and his partner promote genocide. Genocide, as all of you know, is the most serious crime there is. It is murder on a mass scale motivated by hatred. There is no more serious charge you can make against a people than what was made against me and is made against all of you on a daily basis in this country. So I said to my partner, to hell with this. I sent her a letter. I said, apologize and withdraw. She did not. I sent her another letter. I said, apologize and withdraw. She did not. I'm suing her. She's now in the process of writing a comprehensive apology, which I intend to share with all of you. I encourage all of you. So it's not just the criminal law you can use. You can use the civil law just in the circumstance that I did there, where you say, no, 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 no. You cannot accuse me of a crime. You cannot defame me in that way. You can disagree with me. You know, she could fly her Palestinian flag if she wanted to offset my Israeli flag. I don't really give a damn. But don't stand for the things that they're saying about all of us. We have to push back. We have to fight back.
And I guess as we look to close this out, unless there's any more questions, you know, you wanted to leave everyone with a feeling of hope, despite, you know, what we've seen day after day in the headlines, in our own communities, on overpasses, you know, on the streets, at any demonstration with any prime minister, you name it, down at the King Eddie or at the AGO. But we have a question. Okay, over to you.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
Everybody. I walked in and saw the Zoom was going on. My mom is on it, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's Warren!" I have to, because I follow Warren. I had to just come in and say hello because I think you're great. I actually had a follow-up because I missed what kind of claim you brought, and I was just curious about the neighbor, which I've been following on Twitter. And my more important question, which is, I don't mean it in like a creepy way, but I know you have children around my age in their 20s, and I was curious how they're navigating for themselves, because it's pretty, like, for me, it's when you're Jewish, it's obvious, I think, or I would hope, but when you're not Jewish, I think it's a lot harder to kind of know, like, why would I put this kind of target on my back, right? So I was curious about their experience and the impact that having a parent who cares has on you know, being involved in this space.
Well, thank you for that. I had lunch with one of my sons today. I've got 4 kids. They've all got Hebraic names. After I made my first trip to Israel, I came back and I named them all, give them all good Hebrew biblical names. I embarrass the hell out of them all the time, as every parent does, but they know how I am. And my partner does too. And sometimes they bear the burden of that. Some things have happened to my children. Some things have happened to my partner that are unfair, because what we're dealing with here are cowards. You know, they lack the guts to come after me directly. So they'll go after my partner. They go after my kids. And it's hard for them. It's unfair to them. And perhaps some of you have experienced some of this as well. You know, you got a kid or a grandkid, and terrible things are said to them at school or a bus stop or so on. And this is why it is critically important that we all join arms and stick together. Like, I'm just an Irish Catholic guy, and you got me till the end. I believe in you 100%. And I'm not alone. There's so many others who feel as I do, but they're intimidated into silence right now by what they're seeing in the streets. So it's important that we show that we are more numerous and we are more powerful and we are telling the truth. And that's what I say to my kids and my partners, my friends. I say to them all the time, I know I'm going to embarrass you. I know I'm outspoken, but if you love me, you're going to support me because I'm on the right side.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Just really quickly. Further to that, I just want to share with everybody here how many Catholics have reached out to me. Michael Osborne, who's doing One Love.
I know Michael, yeah.
And a huge contingent of Catholic people have reached out to me to say, we want to help you. As well as my Kurdish people, and yeah.
So, and the point is, we've all heard the old cliche, what starts with Jews never ends with Jews. 1 week after October 7th, what happened in Nigeria?
Yeah.
Oh,
500 Christians were slaughtered by Islamists.
Yeah.
So, what happens to you always, history has shown us over and over, whether it's in the Holocaust or now, what starts with you always ends up affecting other communities like mine. So that's why we have a self-interest in, remaining with the Jewish community and supporting the Jewish community and saying, no, that will not stand here. We will not accept it. They are our brothers and sisters, and we are with them. We got to do that. And I think that's why it's important. You reach out to your non-Jewish friends and say, hey, can you sign on to this letter? Can you help us out in this injunction? Can you hold up this sign? Can you come to this rally? I was at a rally in Little Prince Edward County. There were some idiots. It was on a few days ago at the cenotaph, memorializing the men and women who gave their lives to fight Nazism. And these bastards, because that's what they are, showed up there to protest Israel. So a bunch of us, it was pouring rain, it was freezing, it was miserable. Just as many of us showed up across the street to say no. And we were waving Canadian flags. They were not. We were waving flags of Israel. And we weren't promoting hatred. We weren't attacking anybody. We're saying honk your horn if you love Canada and you love Israel. And the vast majority of people going by were honking their horn and supporting us. That's just something simple you can do. We did, and it worked.
Thank you. Yeah, well, they reached out to me. It was amazing.
Good.
Vivian, we have other questions.
Okay, yeah, we're going to go
We're running
quickly.
short on time.
Linda Gottlieb first, and then we'll go to Alan Moyston, okay?
Okay.
Linda. Can you unmute?
Yeah.
There you go.
I just wanted to ask you a quick question. There's a new term, diaspora politics, which had not been used previously, as far as I know. Can you comment upon that?
Well, diaspora politics is, I think it's a criticism in the mouths of some people that politics from the homeland is being brought to the new land. And, sometimes that does happen, and oftentimes it's unhelpful. I think in this case, what we're all seeing is, and this is not all Muslims, but there are some people coming from some Muslim countries who are promoting values, if I can call it that, that are contrary to the values of this country. And, I've always been a believer when I was growing up in multiculturalism. It sounded like a good idea to me, as opposed to the melting pot in the United States. I think I was mistaken. I think that, we've now seen what happens if we let people hold on to values that are hateful and divisive and intolerant. So diaspora politics can sometimes become quite harmful. And I think all of us are seeing that now in Canada. So I think there needs to be a change.
Do you think that this is the basis of the shift in the policies of the Canadian government?
Well, Jews represent 1.4% of the Canadian politicians. So there's about 300,000 of you. Muslims are about 4 times as much. But if that is their strategy, Linda, in the Trudeau government, it's not working, because the National Council of Canadian Muslims announced we're not going to let any liberals come to any of our mosques. So if they're doing this for votes, there's not many votes there, right? I can tell you, I've run national campaigns when Mr. Chrétien was there. That's not enough votes. And even if it was, it's not working, because they've got Trudeau, every time he shows up somewhere, including in Toronto just a few days ago, he's got some members of the Muslim community attacking him and accusing him of genocide. So if this was their strategy, and I say this to anybody who's a liberal listening to me, if that was your strategy, boys and girls, it ain't working, because you're not bringing those radical elements on side. If anything, they're getting angrier at you. Look what they did this week, Linda. They had their vote on denying Israel lethal military trade. It's ridiculous. It didn't make not a single Muslim organization, Islamic organization in this country applauded them for doing so. They want them to go yet further. So really, I think this kind of approach, this kind of politics really doesn't work.
Okay, we got to move on. We've got time for 2 more questions. Okay, so let's go to Alan Moston. Alan, over to you.
You're muted.
Can't hear Alan.
Or mute.
Oh, okay. Hi.
Hi.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
I just wanted everybody to know that B'nai Brith did bring an injunction hearing on the Avenue Road Bridge. The morning they filed it, in the afternoon, the police stated that they were going to do the arrests if anybody was causing any problems on the bridge. The action was dismissed. It actually went over for that weekend to see if there was going to be any problems after the police stated they were starting to enforce the law. And then the action was dismissed after that because there wasn't much happening on the bridge. But B'nai Brith did do that, and it is a remedy that B'nai Brith will be following.
Good.
It has been.
Good. Well, and just to that story when I went after Your Ward News, when they said they were going to bludgeon me to death, I lost that case. The judge, he had his head where, and I think that was a threat. To say you're going to bludgeon somebody to death is a threat. But anyway, he felt otherwise, but I didn't give up. And that's what I'd encourage B'nai Brith and everybody involved. Don't give up. Keep at it, keep at it, keep at it till you get a judge who's sensible and is going to listen, until you have a fact situation that'll work, because the law is on your side.
I agree. Thank you.
Welcome.
Let me just say one more thing. Warren, I'm happy you mentioned B'nai Brith's involvement in the Your Ward News file, because Michael Mostyn, our CEO, worked very diligently with you and in conjunction with you on getting those 2 anti-Semitic bastards, as you would call them, arrested. So that was good. You guys know I was in mainstream media as well for about, 4 decades or something like that. And
Never you will, Marty.
And you both made interesting comments about the media, and I'm getting a lot of questions from members of the Jewish community wondering if the media has changed so much that the reporting is slanted against Jewish people. And, I have a tough time believing it, but when Stephanie mentions, the youth who aren't aware of maybe the history of the persecution of Jews, who are running newsrooms now. And when Warren mentions the short staffing in the newsrooms now, these are very valid points. And I wonder if that is affecting the coverage. Are we seeing biased news against Jewish people now?
Yeah, for sure we are. At CBC and the Toronto Star, we are. Right? Their former ombudsman has likened Hamas to a positive civic force, a municipal government. She said that in the Toronto Star. In the CBC, they reported that the hospital in Gaza City had been destroyed by Israel. Number one, the hospital wasn't destroyed. 500 people weren't killed, and Israel didn't do it. The Palestinians did it to themselves. So yeah, there's a problem in some news organizations, but I'm proud to say I write for the Toronto Sun, which I would argue is the most pro-Israel newspaper on the continent.
Agreed.
The National Post is a pro-Israel newspaper, and our chain, Post Media across the country, is pro-Israel. We're not fuzzy on the issue. Some of the other news organizations, for sure, there is a problem. But, you know, I don't see that as the biggest issue, quite frankly, because unfortunately, Marty knows and Stephanie knows there's not as many people reading as they used to. They're all on these things. This is
Right.
where they are.
You know,
Okay?
if I could just interject about this, you know, Warren has a point about the bias of obvious news organizations in terms of, you know, it's very, you know, it's clear in op-eds, in newspapers, it's very clear the stance of various newspapers, right? So you learn that, but when you look at broadcasting, which is very different, you don't have, you know, the op-ed versus the day-to-day news coverage. So when you look at a news, straight up news organizations, they're trying to be as factually reporting as possible. I still believe that in broadcasting, they're doing the best that they can. Again, it's an issue of oversight, of understanding.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a particular anchor that I worked very closely with at CP24 who really took a great care in every word that was written about the conflict, the war. And this was prior to October 7th. So there are some very conscientious people out there who are deeply aware of the situation. And every time we ever had a story on air about it, it would be, we had to very delicately go over and edit that copy because it has to be, it's critical.
Right.
That oversight is gone. Of the people, the management team that I worked with at CP24, it's gone. There's no more it's gone. And that to me worries me.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's that time. I'd like to thank Warren and Stephanie for a very informative, sincere, detailed Zoom chat. Your unprecedented support and presentation of fact and truth is refreshing, and the path to a future for Canada and all of those who have come here for a better life for their children, grandchildren, and future generations would seem a little brighter today if all of our media reporting was as professional as the two of you. I thank you so very, very much on behalf of B'nai Brith Canada. We will continue to inform you of our upcoming Fireside Chat guests in the near future. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this evening. Please look for those future invitations that we will continue to send to you. And let's pray for light to overpower darkness during these difficult times. We will see you next month, and good night.
Thanks, Aubrey. Thanks everybody.
Thank you,
night.
everyone. Thank you, Warren.
Take care.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Good night.